Hey, this is Ritch Henderson, and y'all are listening to The Barn.
Well, hello, darling, and I'm fine, and how are you? And your picture's just enough to get me through. Well, I've been drinking a little more than I should, and these pills, they never did me any good. Well, I'll never see the sunrise in too many different ways. I'm falling for you more, dear, every day. Well, I've been bleeding.
Hi, and welcome to The Barn, live from The Barn studio. Got a special guest online with us right now. We have Mr. Ritch Henderson. Ritch, how are you, man?
I'm better than I deserve, brother. How are you?
Doing really good. We are excited. I mean, I think, is Missouri becoming your, second home?
Yeah, I mean, really, Missouri was the first place to put me on. Years ago, I played a festival. It was actually technically in Kansas, but it was out in Lacey, Kansas. And then had I wouldn't say a massive, but a fair group of people from Kansas City area just kind of start showing up, and I was able to get out and play gigs out there, started in bars and moved myself up through ticketed venues, and that was kind of my first home away from home for real.
And I bring it up because you just came through St. Louis on the Arlo McKinley tour, and going to be playing really close to our studio here this coming weekend, Saturday, May 13th at Big River Outdoors Campground in Irondale, Missouri. Excited to have you in town, but then also you're playing the Camp Out Music Festival in Jadwin, Missouri. It's about a little bit more central, June 9th and 10th at the Flying W Store and Campground. So you're going to be visiting our area a few times throughout this summer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I try to get out there as much as I can. I definitely, I love Missourians and I love the area. And it's, I've got people there that are like family to me now. So the Camp Out Music Festival in particular is an opportunity for myself and a lot of my friends that all tour and play music out. We're always on different parts of the country. A couple days for that festival, we always get together and hang out. We go on a float trip, usually the day before the set on a Thursday or a Friday. We just all hang out. The fans are welcome. It's almost like a big kind of kinfolk reunion. We all just get together and camp and play music on the stage. And then after the stage, there's always writers' rounds bouncing around different campfires and stuff. It's a real good time.
We talk to a lot of musicians, and writing retreats and like you're saying, writing rounds gets brought up quite a bit. Is that something you do often?
That's not really something that I get into too much. I work with a label down here in Alabama in Montgomery called the Alabama Sound Company, where it's the place that I made my new record at. And a gentleman that is the visionary of that, his name is Brett Robinson. He played steel guitar for Whitey Morgan for 20 years on the road. And he's a real good friend of mine, like a brother to me. And he and I write a lot for stuff, bounce around ideas down when it comes to working on my stuff. He's more of a genius in the arrangement realm of things. But I got another buddy, Marty Brooks, that I write with quite often for his stuff. But I haven't really done a whole lot of co-writes. I've just been, for some reason, stacking up a whole bunch of songs for my catalog. I've probably got 150 songs just sitting in my pocket waiting to see where they're going to land on a project, whether they come out as singles or records or EPs. It's just that's my usual mode of operation for things.
You mentioned the new album. We are big fans here, been digging that for a while now. When I listen to your stuff, there's a vulnerability to your songwriting. And is that something that comes natural to you? Is it something that you go into a songwriting session and think that you're going to do, or does it just sort of happen?
It is a natural thing for me. I think it comes out of necessity because a lot of the stuff that I've written about in the last couple of years, particularly for that record, is really kind of therapy for me. I find catharsis in being honest about things and letting it out and trying to take ownership of the shit that I've done and also make sense of the things that I've been through. Everybody has their own experience, but I've, as a young man, made some particularly life-altering decisions that kind of stuck with me and hung around for the better part of 10 years. The failure of a marriage, Afghanistan. I was there when I was just turned 19 years old. The month after I turned 19, I found myself in Afghanistan, and it's just kind of art has been my outlet, and it up to that point in my journey had definitely been a very cathartic thing for me. But I've been leaning a little towards more poetic license lately, and kind of starting to develop some characters in writing, and putting some of my own experience in there as well, but also not focusing so much on just the devastating factors of life, but also some of the better stuff coming up too.
And you've been pretty open about some of your struggles with, PTSD, and you mentioned your time in the Marine Corps. I'm sure that finds its way into your writing.
Can't speak for everybody's experience that suffers with these types of things, but for me, for years I just shoved it down. I got back from Afghanistan and didn't recognize I had any issues or feelings about it at all. I just thought that was what we were supposed to experience. I was a Marine. That's what we did, and then I didn't recognize until a decade later that I was just shoving it down with alcohol. So I guess more so than gives me an opportunity to pull it out and look at it right in its face for what it is, and kind of make sense of some of those things. And I guess that does bring a finite closure to it, in a sense, to being able to look at it. Because with a lot of things, you don't make a conscious decision, or at least I don't make a conscious decision to take things that are traumatic and push them away and not think about them. It just kind of, for me, it happened, and I didn't recognize that I had years of my memories that were gone. And sometimes exploring through art and being open and kind of allowing yourself to be a vessel will bring some of that stuff out of your subconscious to the forefront so you can actually have an objective look at it.
I applaud guys like you, guys like Arlo McKinley, even the Tyler Childers, Jason Isbell, John Moylan. I think with that vulnerability, it's actually a way for songwriters like you guys to show strength. I know kind of the old school thought is like, oh, you're weak for having these emotions and these feelings. But I actually applaud you guys. And I feel like artistry is coming back in that sense because you guys are talking about what people go through, and struggles that people have, and they can relate to your music. So
I sure appreciate it. I think, and again, I can only speak to my experience, but for me, I was in bands for years and we did the whole cover thing. And then I wrote songs that were, attempts to appeal to certain directions and stuff. And as I got older, I recognized that I didn't want to build this identity that I had to put on to be on stage or to hide from, to get off of stage. I didn't want to become this thing that I really wasn't, because, this is a thing for me that I always want to do. When I'm 65 years old, I want to be playing in theaters and touring the country when I want to. So I just decided that I was going to come out and be honest about things, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I knew that there would be enough people out there like me who would resonate with it, that would allow me to have a solid fan base, and the fan base that I wanted to. Because, I think everybody thinks that artists just want to be as revered and as famous as possible. Like as many people as we can possibly get on our product, that's what we're looking for. But oftentimes I find that that's not the case, particularly in the genre and realm of music that, you're into and that we all perform and create. It's not that situation. We don't want everyone in the world necessarily to be there. We want the people who can relate and who are like-minded individuals to come and be a part of our experience, because, less is certainly more when it comes to quality of fan base to an extent. Of course, you have to have enough to be sustainable, but everybody knows what it's like when their favorite artist gets too big and the wrong crowd starts mixing in with the day oneers, and shit gets a little bit weird. You know what I mean?
This resurgence of that and that sound and that popularity, to be honest, how much of that do you attribute to sort of what Nashville became in the 2010s, I guess, where it seemed very, very fake at times, and, it felt like the man was kind of pushing it. Do you think there's a response to that in what we're seeing that's becoming popular now?
Yeah, certainly. And I think anytime there's a level of gatekeeper to where it's a quantity and not quality kind of thing, art seems to find new avenues. Like it used to be the radio that pushed and controlled everything, and the radio's dead now. We're listening online and we're listening on Spotify. We go to on-demand shows. And as far as corporate Nashville radio goes, I don't know anybody who's actually clocking into that. That's at least a music fan. People who are passive listeners, they may turn on their local pop country radio station and roll on through, but it's none of the people that I know and that I experienced this journey with. So I think a lot of that had to do with, the art's always been here. I mean, you look back since Wilco, a long time ago, this type of music's been doing its thing. But I do think the overabundance of really thin veneered music has kind of given way for people to start searching in other places where artists like myself and Arlo and Jason Isbell, for a day oneer, can get out and find these other avenues to reach an audience. And I mean, you see, I feel like we're kind of in the middle of another resurgence to where some of the major labels are starting to get a hold of what we're doing now at this level. We've got friends of mine who are really starting to move in the right direction. My buddy Drayton Farley just passed 10 million streams on his song Pitch and Fits. And up until this last record, he was entirely independent. He released his last record on 30 Tigers, but still, that's pretty much an independent label services company for artists in our type of genre. So I feel like in the next couple years, there's a real opportunity for them to pick up young artists that are flashy and put 6 writers in a room and try to make them have their hand at Americana music or outlaw country or alternative country, whatever you want to call the genre. I don't think it'll bode very well for them because there's too many of us that have got a solid foothold in our own experience with our own avenues at this point. But it's an exciting time, but it's also a time of change that we're really experiencing. And, Chris Stapleton and Sturgill Simpson came out and really blew the doors off for us to make our way. And then Tyler Childers came up. Morgan Wade blew up. Drayton Farley's up there now. Nolan Taylor blew up. Zach Bryan, of course. I don't like to use him as an example because a lot of people will say that he's an independent artist, but they don't recognize he's been signed to Warner Records for a very large part of his journey, and that's definitely a major label in the same vein. But the other things, not to throw any shade at Brian's work or what he's doing, it's just apples and oranges because when you think about, even the people that are signed to like 30 Tigers, their budgetary constraints are 1/1000th of something that would be signed to a major label like Warner Records.
Can we talk about your new album a little bit?
Yeah, of course.
Fallacies and 4-letter words. I'm hearing that some of this, if not all, is recorded in analog. Is that right?
Yeah, every bit of it is. We, the Alabama Sound Company, it's, we wanted to get back. We kind of have a vision about how to make records, and it's along with that less is more mentality. We're not dubbing a whole lot. We're not doing any punching and those sorts of things, which means like editing while recording for those that are listening that don't have any experience in the studio. But for us, we went down to Montgomery and we got in an old church that was built in the late 1800s, right next to technical earth recorders. And we set up some baffles, probably like 14-foot baffles around the drums. And we got in a room and we got there in the morning and nobody had heard the songs except for myself and Brett, the producer. And we charted the songs out probably 11:30 in the morning, and we would all start working out different pieces. And the drummer would say, well, what if we do this here? Or what if we experience the minor 2 at the end of the verse to bring that kind of dark feeling down? And then we'd hash those songs out until 7 or 8 at night, to where we had a bunch of microphones set up around the room, all real microphones, old microphones from back in the day, like you said, entirely analog gear. And we'd start rolling. And sometimes we'd start rolling at 9:30 at night to get the capture of what we'd been working on that day. And I feel like that allowed us to have fresh takes on songs, even songs that I've been playing on stage for, 3 or 4 years now. They got to have that new passion that you get in a song when it's just created. I feel like the way that we went about it allowed the record to breathe authenticity and actually have the original forethought of passion, because I feel like you can kind of beat that out of it whenever you've got 92 tracks down and you're working on your 7th guitar pass for the night. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. So I would say some people might call you crazy though, right? Because it's definitely a labor of love. It would be maybe easier or definitely quicker to record digitally, right?
Well, yeah, it certainly would be both. It would be easier and quicker in a sense. And I guess it all depends on, the level of work you can attribute to the day, because Brett's got a thing that he says, what do they use before Pro Tools? And he pauses for a second. He says they use Pros. And the guys that I work with down in the studio are that for sure. Once you chart these songs out, you tell them what direction you're going and they don't miss. I mean, we probably did the song Hello Darlin'. We probably played 25 perfect takes of that song. They all had their own little idiosyncrasies that 1 or 2 of the takes ended up being a battle of like, which one is the one that we want to go with? Because we were, again, starting from start to finish. The drummer counted in. We all started playing the song. And it is definitely a longer, more arduous process. And it definitely was a lot more expensive. I mean, we could have ran in there, put down a rhythm section and dubbed everything one take rhythm section, splice and edit the things that weren't exactly as we needed them to. But I feel like even though you don't recognize you can feel that, you can feel it, and if those of you that are listening that don't understand or think that maybe I might be one of the weird analog dudes that's full of my own stuff, go listen to my record and then put on something that was made for the radio and see if you can tell a sonic and emotional difference, because I've done the A/Bs and I know that you can. And it's a thing for me that I think is worth it every time. I don't know that I'll ever record another way, or really anywhere else for that matter.
You mentioned Hello Darling. Do you care if we hear a little bit?
Let's go ahead.
Well, hello, darling, and I'm fine, and how are you? And your picture's just enough to get me through. Well, I've been drinking a little more than I should, and these pills, they never did me any good. Well, I'll never see the sunrise in too many different ways. I'm falling for you more, dear, every day. Well, I've been bleeding. I swear I've come undone.
Tell us a little bit about Hello Darling.
Hello Darling was a song that it was born out of me being away, from the people that I love and care about a lot, being on the road. But in particular, I wrote that song as the pandemic started to come down on all of us. I had been on the road a whole bunch, and stuff was starting to move in the right direction for us, and then the world shut down, and I had to come to Alabama, and my lady was down in Texas. And at the beginning of this thing, we thought everybody with asthma was going to die, and I have asthma, and she's a nurse that was working in the hospital with COVID patients. So it was a really uncertain time, so we stayed apart from each other halfway across the country and spent the bulk of our relationship over a cell phone call. And it wasn't enough for me, and it definitely wasn't enough for her, and it was just a very challenging time. And I got to thinking about, there's a lot of people that experienced that over that time, and it was a good opportunity to kind of put out what I was feeling into words. And I was just thinking about, no matter how much you love somebody, there's only so much you can say on a phone, and it does kind of devolve into that, hey, what you doing? How are you? I'm good. How are you? Good. And you really lose any kind of substance after a while. And it was that back and forth of trying to maintain this love from such a distance. And in the midst of all the chaos of the country, that's when that song came out, and that's kind of what it is for me.
When you hear that song, does it immediately take you back to that time, or that feeling, or that sentiment?
It does, in a sense, and it's got new life in a sense, because when I wrote that song and really I performed it for a year or so, an entirely different way. Like even still when I perform it solo acoustic, I do it. The arrangement's a little different, and I swap the verses. Because as a writer, you write these songs and then other people get a hold of them, and it's not just your song anymore. And I've got a considerable amount of people across the country that love that song in either iteration. And for me, when I recorded that song in the studio, I was experiencing almost the same emotion, except for an entirely different reason, because we were being stubborn about how we were recording. So we went down to Montgomery and locked ourselves in, and my lady was still in Texas. So, day 10, 11, and 12 of 12 and 13-hour days in the studio, you get a little homesick. And when I hear it in that iteration, it takes me there to that moment when we captured that recording in Montgomery and all of the wonderful and challenging experiences of that situation. And then the other iteration, which I do believe I'll release here before long on streaming and the other platforms, definitely takes me back to that moment and that time frame back in the summer of 2020.
Yeah, that was a wild time, wasn't it?
Man, it was weird. We thought, it was just going to be a couple weeks. So for us, we'd been touring a lot. We had a lot of cash in our pockets. We went and bought a boat, and we were going to hang out in the national forest here in North Alabama and get some vacation in, because at that time we were probably doing 250 to 300 dates a year. And then when we started to recognize that it may not ever even be coming back, it really, it took a toll on all of us. It was a sketchy situation, just like it was, for everyone else.
Yeah, we've talked to a few artists that said it was sort of a blessing. And I know there was some tragedy and people lost their lives, so I'm not making light of that. But it was a little bit of a blessing in disguise for them as a touring musician and as a professional musician, because nothing really stops the train moving a lot of the time unless the train has to stop moving, right? So it almost, like we talked to William Clark Green, and he said it was sort of a blessing. I finally got to be home for a little bit and, spend time with my wife and my family and those things.
It changed my trajectory as an artist and as a person, just like I'm sure it did with everyone. That was a major situation in all of our lives. But for me, it made me recognize the fact that I did have some areas of my life that I was neglecting for this totality of pursuance of this dream that I had. And, there are many ways to skin a cat, as they say.
Right.
You don't have to be on the road 300 dates a year to see growth and to build a fan base and establish meaningful connections with the people who consume and enjoy the stuff that you create. And for me, that was the biggest eye-opener. When we had to find another way to navigate, it really allowed me to learn how to go forward with more of a balance instead of, for a while pre-pandemic, my only identity and the only thing that I was able to do was just tour because, at that time, I was still playing a lot of bars where nobody cared at all what I was doing, and I was, hard-fought battles to win fans one by one, night by night, in city after city. So it kind of, we experienced our fair share of tragedy. My lady lost her lifelong best friend, who is a mother of 2 children, at a very young age, and that was a life-altering experience for us as well. But at the same time, with all good things come bad things, and all bad things come good things. And I know that I can't do anything to make any of that any different. All I can do now is just reflect on it with gratitude that I am where I'm at in this part of my journey. And that was a part of the journey,
Absolutely. Ritch, we can't let you get out of here without bringing up the song "If It's Only for Tonight." Just
yes, sir.
Just past 100,000 streams on Spotify. Why do you think that song has connected with so many people over the years?
It's one that came out of just a brutally honest, tragic experience of mine and a person that I know. And it seems that a lot of people, have dealt with those similar experiences that are outlined in the song. I think a lot of people connect to it because there is a sense of ambiguity. It doesn't necessarily, it lends some singularity to the point of what's the driving factor of the song. But for the most part, it kind of displays this person experiencing a struggle, and we all experience a struggle. And regardless of the severity of the struggle, some people go through things that are harder than other people, but the hardest thing you've ever been through is still the hardest thing you've ever been through, whether it's as difficult as someone else's struggle or not. I feel like it connected with people because of that, and because, I was just honest and vulnerable about some things. I cast some light on a character in there that, some of my experience is put into, and it's a little bit shameful, but I was honest about it. And I feel like honesty, even in our shame, is a very human condition. And if it's not for folks, it should be. It did sit for a while, 5,000, 10,000 streams. And for some reason, at the turn of this year, it broke 20,000 streams in January. And the algorithm got a hold of it, best I can tell, and started pushing it out to a lot of people. And the more people that got it, the more people that have been giving it all of the green flags for Spotify and Apple Music. It's a strange thing to see, because I've worked and toiled and toured and ran marketing, paid PR, done the whole thing.
Right.
Really for not a lot of return. And then one day something just clicked. And now 2 days ago, we broke 500,000 total streams.
Wow.
Which blows me away. I can't even imagine that my songs have been listened to over 500,000 times. But, I don't think there's any magic in understanding what will or won't connect with people. I think if any artists are listening, I can just tell you, be honest about it and just put it out there. You might not have the best recordings. I recorded that song almost 8 years ago now and held on to it for a long time before I put it out, because I wasn't even sure sonically it was where I wanted to be, and honestly, you don't have to have the record with the analog gear. You don't have to have the sweetest Gibson guitars. Like, if you've got something you need to say as an artist, you should record it. You should say it, put it out. And then you should definitely reach out to folks with playlists. Like, I've got a pretty large playlist called the Alternative AF. If you're an artist that's listening and you got some stuff that you feel like is important that people need to hear, hit me up on Instagram and send it to me. I will listen to it. And, if I vibe it, I'll put it out for everybody else to hear, because I think it's important as a community for us to kind of support each other.
Do you care if we hear a little bit on our way out here?
No, go ahead, man.
Let's play it. What a great tune. Ritch Henderson will be performing in Irondale, Missouri this Saturday, May 13th at 8 p.m. at Big River Outdoor Campground. Shout out to Josh Wright, owner of Big River Outdoors Campground, and then also the Camp Out Music Festival in Jadwin, Missouri, June 9th and 10th. Courtesy of Jim Guthrie. Shout out those guys. You want to go to richhenderson.com for all of Rich's information. We really appreciate your time. Can't wait to connect with you when you get in town, man.
Of course, brother. I sure appreciate y'all. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
Well, hello, darling. And I'm fine, and how are you? And your picture's just enough to get me through. Well, I've been drinking a little more than I should. And these pills, they never did me any good. Well, I'll never see the sun rise in too many different